Here's Florian, and I'm today here with a new guest, Holger. Holger, introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me, Florian. I'm Holger, one of the founders and CEO of Blinkist. And Blinkist is a Berlin-based startup or mid-sized company in these days that helps you to fit more reading and learning into your everyday life. We do that by transforming the key insights from nonfiction books into a format that we call a book in blinks. And a book in blinks is something that you can read or listen to in 15 minutes on the go, when you commute to work, when you work out during the day, or when you're relaxed on your couch at night.
So Blink is a nice summary of a book. So how would a blink of your life look like or sound like?
Oh wow, that's a really tough question. It's really hard to boil that long life down into a blink. But I'd say I grew up in a small town in the middle of Germany. I studied business administration because already in school I've done some projects thanks to a teacher that were focused on starting your own business. So we kind of had a game where we would think of a business idea and then start it. In not in real life, but in theory, and pitch that to other teachers. So that kind of instilled my entrepreneurial spirit. And then I went on to university to study business administration to learn the basics of starting a company and running a company. I had the first real life entrepreneurial experience in university, where I started with colleagues from university. I started a student consultancy where we would go to other companies and pitch them projects, how we could support them with their marketing or other projects. And with two of the friends that I started that consultancy with, I also later went on to start Blinkist. Through that experience in university, we were really, really bullish on starting a company on a bigger scale after university. So we would frequently meet and think about ideas that are worth founding a company with, or problems that are worth solving. And eventually we found, or kind of came to the idea that later became Blinkist, and then started Blinkist back in 2012. So that's my professional life in a blink.
Awesome. So if you could give or summarize two advices out of your study times, like out of the projects you had all together, what were the two key learnings you took from this time?
You mean from while I was at university?
Yeah, exactly, with the projects and like all the...
So one personal advice, I'm really, really, in hindsight, appreciate that I took time to study and also took time to travel and experience a lot of things personally and professionally during university. There are some students that want to rush through university to start working and start making a career. But what I realize right now, once you're in a job, it gets harder and harder to do a sabbatical, because then you get used to a certain salary, and then you just keep on working and don't really have time to explore the world anymore, or do something that is not on track with your career. Of course, you can do anything, but it gets harder and harder. And when I was in university, I was ambitious, but at the same time, I didn't stress myself out, and I took 6 years overall to study. Planned in a year abroad. I studied in Mexico. I did an internship in China for 6 months. I did a lot of internships in general to test different career paths, and a lot of times I learned what I didn't want to do. That was also a really important learning. So to take that time to really explore where you want to go in life, both professionally and also personally, and to discover that beautiful planet here, I think is one of the core advices I would give. And then second advice, more on a professional matter, well, it's part of the first advice I'd give. Start to, if you think you're interested in something, then try to find out whether you're really interested in it in practical terms by doing an internship, or trying to do what you think you may want to do in practice, and don't wait too long for that, because it's really easy to test yourself in different fields during university. It gets harder and harder once you're out.
Awesome. So you started Blinkist, and with every B2C company, you have mostly the problem you need to first give them something they want to buy, and then if you have that, and your case, the summaries of the books, you need to find the people which want to buy it. So how did you start to tackle this problem? Because chicken egg, you need both at the same time.
Yeah, it took us a long time. It took us 2.5 years until we found product market fit, when you are at a point where you have the right product and the right marketing channels that attract the right audience for that product. So we went on a long search for that product market fit and didn't know from the start. We started with to just build a product that we thought that we wanted to use, and we thought that we are our perfect first customers, and that people like us would like to use that too, which was partly right. But then we also found through user testing then that the way we designed it, the way we built the app, wasn't really perfect. So that just required us to fail and then to learn from it and improve the product step by step. And marketing wise, it was really trial and error. We tried a lot of both organic channels and then eventually also paid channels. And on those paid channels, a lot of different targeting methods, a lot of different strategies to talk about Blinkist, to pitch Blinkist. You can describe what we do. You can be really more motivational and focus on the things that you can become with Blinkist. And you have a lot of different routes to tell the story to get people interested in initially, and also different funnels to transform their initial interest into a buying intent or into an actually purchase. And there was a lot of trial and error. There is no magic recipe. It's really requires, I would say, in hindsight, a lot of common sense. So you really need to put yourself into a lot of different potential customers' shoes, and then just go out there and test different things.
What was the solution? You tested different things. What was the one thing which worked, or like the two things which worked?
Either on the product side, what helped us was when we switched to a subscription-only model. We tested subscription versus single purchases for each book in Blinks, and there eventually we found that getting you to make a new purchase decision for every single book in Blinks you want to read or listen to is really tough, because you have a lot of psychologically hard purchase decisions. Whereas in a subscription, you decide once and then you can read as much as you want. So that was a really important step for us. Adding audio, we started with text only and eventually then added audio versions, was a really, really big step for us, because that would open up a new market for us, people that are rather interested in listening. It would make it easier for people to engage, because there are sometimes where you can only listen to something but not read to something. And then also extending a library to English. We started in German only and then eventually launched English, and that opened up a completely new market for us. So I would say these three things really helped us to break through on the product side and have a product that people actually want to pay for. And also that we've built up a certain library size over time definitely helped. And then on the marketing side, it was really started with simple things that are nowadays really common sense, but for us were new. And also since the whole startup ecosystem wasn't as developed back then as it is right now, it wasn't that easy to find role models or to find mentors that would help us and show us how it's done. So we had to learn a lot on our own. So learning how to attribute certain signups to certain marketing channels, setting up a solid tracking and attribution model, and then learning, finding the right creative. So we learned that Facebook mobile install ads worked really well for us, and there we had to learn the types of targeting that you should apply, lookalike audiences. No surprise, and these days everyone who's into paid acquisition knows that this is the thing to do. And then on the creative side, to find good ways to talk about Blinkist, find good images, creatives that speak to people, that make them stop quickly when they browse through their feed. There were a lot of learnings. One universal learning: use people instead of animation, like instead of anything that is more animated, because when you scroll through your social feed, you rather stop when you see a nice face instead of a drawing or something. But then, there are a lot of really small learnings, and the world is turning. Every month or every year, there's a new trend. Now it's video. Now you need a video to really stand out in Facebook, and who knows what's next?
Animations. So every startup has a problem. Like if you're in the beginning, you have a lot of stuff to do and you need to try to do as much as you can in the small team you have. And then you change always the decision when I should hire new people and which people I should hire. How did you tackle that?
So we always tried to do as much as we can in the beginning and to learn as much about a field as we could to really build some confidence whether we really need a person in that field, and also if we had the confidence we need a person in that field to be able to evaluate who's good and bad. If you've never done something, it's hard to hire the right person because anyone could tell you anything, and you just have to buy it. So we always followed the approach to develop some expertise on our own, and that also required some extra hours in the early days, which I think is completely normal. But then once we knew, for example, that paid acquisition is the way to go for us to grow, and it will most likely be Facebook and Instagram in the early years before we tap into new channels, then we did everything we could to find a person who's already done that, who's capable of doing that and bringing us to the next level there. And then now these days we have a really good employer brand. Back then no one knew us. There were not a lot of inbound applications coming in, so we had to go out there. We had to ask our network, we had to go to events, we had to stalk people on LinkedIn and reach out to them and pitch them Blinkist, pitch them the opportunity where we want to take the company and how they could be an important part of that journey.
So you focused first on marketing, right?
Both. I mean, I'm talking about marketing. I choose some marketing examples now because that's what I've been doing a lot of times. My co-founder was more focused on the product side, and my third co-founder more on the technical engineering side. So that's why I choose these marketing examples. But we had these challenges in all fields. Like we needed to hire great marketing talent, product, engineering, content. Also then eventually on a organization side, so an HR and people on our team. Yeah.
So before we go on to the team and team structure wise, we learn out of failures. So what you would say were the biggest failures you had with Blinkist, and you learned which you learned the most out of it?
There are a lot of things. It's hard to choose the biggest ones. Definitely a big mistake we've made was to launch in German instead of in English. There was a failure or not a failure, but a big mistake in hindsight.
Let's say mistake, not failure.
That limited our market artificially. It didn't have any advantage. We could have, especially in Berlin, where you have a lot of English natives, we could have built an English content team as easy as it was to build a German content team. So. And if we had started in English, the early years would have been much easier for us because we learned that in Germany it's hard to sell a digital subscription, whereas in other, especially English markets, people are more progressive, are more taking a risk and just buy a service if they like it. So we faced a lot of tough battles in the beginning until we then rolled out to English. That was definitely a huge mistake. Another, like on a smaller side, I still remember when I had to let the first person go. We had an intern back then, and she was a marketing intern for 6 months, and she wanted to stay after these 6 months and shift into a full-time role. And I knew quite early that it's probably not going to work out. But she was doing a good job, but we were too young and too early we didn't have technically the need for a marketing person. She didn't have a chance to do a good job, but I didn't realize. And then 1 week before or 2 weeks before her internship was over, I told her that actually we don't we can't offer you a full-time position. And that came completely by surprise because we've never talked about it in the first 6 months. And that was a big mistake and a big something that I needed to learn to be really honest with people if they either don't perform well or if they perform well, but if I realize for whatever reason that we don't need this position, so such a message doesn't come by surprise, and to in general have more frequent check-ins on how someone is doing. I think you never, when I swear to myself back then, I never want to be in a situation again where I have to confront a person with such news and it comes as a surprise.
Yeah.
That's two things that came to mind.
That's really good learnings. So Blinkist is quite famous, like for your internal structure. You have a quite unique position on that. Do you want to tell us something how you built up your structure and how this developed over time?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. We started without thinking about organization or culture. Just we were focused on product, on marketing, and then unconsciously build a classic hierarchy in the first 2 years with us founders as the department leads and everything that you've seen in a bigger company, we had it. And then after 2 years, eventually realized that this sucked. We finally had our own company and then did build a culture that was not fun and not nice to work for. And then took a step back and thought how else could we organize Blinkist in order to have a modern and a more engaged workplace. Then my co-founder did some research and found an organization model called holacracy, which is really focused on empowering people, really flat hierarchies, decentral decision making, transparency, and so on. And we thought that sounds really well, sounds really nice, and why don't we test it? So we started to roll out holacracy. When we've been around 15 people, and then we rolled it out. We rolled out a light version of holacracy, which we called Blinkist, and then we grew from 15 to 30, 35 in the next 12 to 18 months. And through that growth, we were facing a lot of new problems. So holacracy, this implementation of holacracy solved some problems, but introduced new problems. For example, since holacracy is a term that you can read about. Everyone read about it. Some read the book, some read articles, some heard a podcast. So we had, out of 35 people, we had 10 different definitions of holacracy, and now we work together. We also didn't do a good job on describing what Blinkist is in detail. And then an additional problem was holacracy is a really technocratic system. There are a lot of different rules for every single thing. So we learned, or we experienced, that in a lot of situations where we were facing a challenge, people were not asking themselves, how could we solve that challenge? But what should we do per holacracy to solve that challenge? So people were making it more complex and doing a detour instead of pragmatically solving problems and solving challenges. And the last part was that a big misconception of holacracy is that there are no managers, there is no leadership. But we hired leaders to be good leaders and to guide people and to mentor people. But those leaders felt blocked to actually lead because of that misconception of holacracy. And at the same time, the circle members, the team members, felt a lack of leadership. They didn't grow. They sometimes didn't have someone to seek advice. So due to all of these problems and many more, we decided to step away from holacracy again and build our own system that we own, that you can't read about and have a different interpretation about, and that takes the best things of holacracy but simplifies the rest to not kill people with too many pages and too many things. And that system is called the Blinkist operating system. It has values at its core, values that describe how we want to work together. It has some guiding principles around there that give people a guiding star when to make decisions. We want one of our values is still to champion self-empowerment, so we kept that from holacracy. We want people to take decisions in their domains. We don't want managers to take all of the decisions. But in order for people to take the right decisions, we need these values and guiding principles, so they have a kind of a compass to take the right decisions. And then around that, we have some processes and policies that we find important in order for people to take the right decisions and in order for everyone to work together well. And in a nutshell, that combines the best elements of holacracy, strips out the complexity, and easy to understand for everyone. And it's so far working out. We've introduced it when we've been, I think, 55 people. We're 100 now. We've onboarded probably 40 new people this year, and we have really good onboarding onto that Blinkist operating system now. And it's working really seamlessly. Everyone gets on board really well. Everyone understands how things are done. Everyone gets into the performing phase quite soon. So we're really happy and hope that it's still going to work when we're 200 people. Or maybe we'll have to adjust some things, but we hope, we're confident that the core values and the guiding principles and the framework in general will also still be in place with an organization that is twice the size of right now.
So what was your main problem with the old department system, like the standardized company old department system?
So first of all, we founders, as the department leads, we've became bottlenecks. So we didn't train people to take their own decisions. People would come to us for decisions. So that wasn't good for our work-life balance. For us as founders, it wasn't engaging for the employees to ask for everything and not knowing where they could make their own decisions and where not. It's not really fulfilling, engaging. Doesn't help them to grow. So it wasn't an environment where you could grow and really move fast and agile. Agility and speed became an issue eventually because there were these bottlenecks in leadership. And then also we saw that some politics started to happen where we founders, okay, if I hire someone in my department, then another founder wanted to hire someone in their department too, or the other way around. So we all kind of became little politicians, so like in a big corporate. And we saw these tendency and we said, that's not who we want to be. That's not what we want to do. And then fortunately saw it and reacted.
Cool. So then you said like you introduced holacracy and some problems were solved and some new came up. So, which problems solved holacracy? Like, what was gone as problems?
So, holacracy, we defined the circles, and within those circles, we defined roles. And every circle and every role had a purpose, had accountabilities, and had domains where they were allowed to take their own decisions. So, that really put power to the people. Gave really decentralized decision-making power, and made it more engaging for people because they could take their own decisions. They didn't need to check with 2 different reporting lines all the time, and everything was more explicit. So it wasn't as random anymore, where I would say, okay, I want to take this decision and you can take this decision, but we wrote it down and then it was clear for everyone. We also had a more streamlined meeting policy. Holacracy has meetings like tacticals and governance meetings where you meet every week in a tactical meeting to discuss with your circle, with your team, to discuss certain things, to give you an update, to discuss agenda items. That made things much more productive. It took usually for example, when I had an idea, I would write a long email to all the people that I wanted to discuss this idea or that I seeked advice from, and then we would start an endless email discussion. Then once we had these weekly tacticals, I know, I'm going to meet with them next week in a tactical, so I'm just going to put that idea on the tactical agenda, pitch it quickly, and then we discuss it for 2 minutes, and then decide on next actions. That was much more efficient, like a getting things done, trusted system on a company level. That worked really well. But then it introduced new problems, such as the ones I described, where people felt blocked when it comes to leadership. People overcomplicated things because it became a religion.
You said like the leaders felt they're cut off. So how you connected them back in? What was your tactic to say, okay, make the decisions more simpler because with the guidelines you had, and then have people there which still can lead you? How did you solve it? You just pointed people to each other, or how you made it?
So, first of all, it's not that all the leaders at Blinkist felt blocked, but especially people that we hired newly that came into this to Blinkist when Blinkersy had been set up. And we hired them as a team lead because also in holacracy we had circles and still had a circle lead who would perform, which is a role also defined by holacracy to that has certain domains and has certain accountabilities. So we hired people into lead positions, but they felt then insecure in regard to what extent can they lead, to what extent should they lead. And the way we solved this, when we moved away from holacracy, one part of the Blinkist operating system was a really clear role description of the circle lead description. So we still have circles. We kept that name from holacracy and a circle lead. And now we have a really explicit description of that role, also leadership principles, to make it explicit to everyone what kind of leadership do we want and need, and what kind of leadership or management or micromanagement do we not want. And that clarity helped a lot.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So, what you would say is your biggest challenge today?
Oh, there are lots of challenges. What's the biggest challenge? I think it's always challenging to grow the organization while keeping to keep the culture while the organization is growing so fast. As I said, we've probably hired 40 people in the last 12 months, so we almost doubled the organization. And to onboard them in a way that our culture stays, that we stay, true to our culture is a challenge. I mean, the culture evolves, which is fine, which is normal. A culture with 200 people is different than the one with 20 people. But to keep that culture great, that's definitely a challenge that we're focused on. And so far, we're doing really well, I would say. But we also put a lot of effort into it, and we're not underestimating that it's a challenge. We've underestimated organization in the early days. We hopefully never going to do that again. Then it's always challenging to keep growing at the pace we're growing. We need to find new marketing channels, need to become more efficient in the marketing channels we're in already, explain, make Blinkist relevant to growing audience year over year. There's still, I think, the biggest challenge in that regard is that there are some skeptics that think that Blinkist is a tool that people may use to replace books, and people say, well, you can't possibly bring a 200-page books into a 5-page summary, and to really get across that that's not what Blinkist is about, that it's rather a starting point for people, a smart companion that helps them to discover new titles, to tap into new topics, and then make an educated decision where to dive deeper and give them some high-level food for thought and inspiration. That it's a perfect complementary service to deep learning, like reading a book or taking a class. And once people get it, they're excited, and I think, wow, that's really necessary and needed. But to get the people to see it from that perspective, it's a challenge. And we discussed it before, you hit the record button. On the product side, it's obviously engagement. Like, everyone who hears about Blinkist says, yes, of course, I want to read more books. And cool, there is a service for that that helps me to fit more reading, learning into my life. It's the same thing that everyone would like to do more sports, or most of the people. Yeah. But then it's still tough or challenging for people to actually start that habit and keep that habit. And we also see that some of the people who subscribe then become inactive. They don't manage to build that habit over the long run. And that's challenging. That's not an easy... There's no easy solution to that, to really change habits and make people commit to their goals. But it's a really motivating and fulfilling challenge, because if we succeed, and with every person that we help to build a habit, we really make a significant positive impact on their life. So that's what's driving us here every time. And that's probably the long-term challenge, the challenge that will always be there. You will never reach the goal. But that's what's driving us here. Yeah.
More education is always better. The same like sports is always good.
Definitely. Yeah.
Cool. How do you handle balancing between free time and work? The work-life balance, the famous one.
I try to really make time for both. I try to not work too long. For example, in the early days, we had to work a lot, and we also worked on weekends. But once we were out of the really tough times and a little more stable, we stopped working on weekends. We kind of said, okay, this is a business now. Of course, we are founders and we want to make it great, but it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So we need to stay in shape for that marathon. So let's really make weekends. So I don't work on weekends, and also during the week I try to not work too long hours. I usually start around 8 and finish between 6 and 7 p.m., which is still long, but I still don't have time to do something in the evening. Sometimes I go running at lunch break out of the office. Now I became a dad 4 weeks ago. Now I'll leave even a little earlier to have more time with my son, and to just make sure that I prioritize things and don't chase every opportunity.
How you prioritize?
I try to really look at, first of all, I try to learn better what can and should I delegate, what should I still be doing on my own, and what can I easily delegate to people. Yeah. That's tough, not because I don't trust people, but because I still like to get my hands dirty and do certain things to see an immediate impact. So that's what I keep learning. And then for the things that I'm doing, I really try to look at impact, what's really important now. what has the right impact, or what can be done really quickly and it's not blocking me for too long. But it's still like I don't have a sophisticated system. It's a lot of gut feeling and intuition.
Okay, cool. So the second last question, I think it's one of the best questions for you. What's your favorite book?
Fiction or non-fiction?
Let's make both.
Okay, so fiction, it's The Power of One. A really nice story that plays in South Africa and about a young kid that becomes a boxer. It's just a beautifully written story. And non-fiction, I'd say it's Mindset from Carol Dweck, because it's about a growth or a static mindset, and that everyone has. Everyone approaches different situations either with a growth or a static mindset. And when you're a static mindset, you think that you have certain talents that have been given to you from the moment when you're born, and some things you're good at, some things you're not good at. So technically, why bother to learn something you're not good at? It's not your talent. Yeah. So, in a growth mindset, you approach things from a perspective that you can learn anything. That there's, of course, you have certain talents. Certain things come easier to you than others, but ultimately you can, through hard work, you can learn anything. And when I read that, I became more aware of situations when I had a static mindset and when I had a growth mindset. And in situations where I had a static mindset, it was easier for me to then see that and then also change that and learn how to approach things more optimistically. And also when I, as a leader in a leadership position that I'm in now, to also evaluate others more with a growth mindset, to give them the benefit of a doubt that they can learn things, or also encourage them and give them confidence that they can learn something. So I found that really, it's an easy concept. It had a big impact for me so far. And it's an easy, nice read. It's written really well. So yeah, Mindset from Carol Dweck. So
should I read it or should I Blinkist it?
Both. Give it a try on Blinkist to get the core ideas. They are easy. I tried to explain it now, but I'm not really good at explaining, especially in English. So yeah, it makes sense to check it out on Blinkist. But then if you're not completely disappointed by the content on Blinkist, definitely check out the book. It's not a long read and it's really interesting. Because also, like after, I think in the first 2 chapters, Carol describes the concept in general, and then she applies it to a certain situation, how static or growth mindset helps you in your professional life, in your personal life, in sports, as a parent, and so on. So that's really interesting, and it touches different aspects of everyone's life, especially also for young parents now. You can do a lot of things right or wrong with your kids. If you tell them, if they have a soccer match and you tell them, wow, you have such a good talent at soccer, then you rather nurture a static mindset, because you always argue with talent. Or if you say, hey, nice, you practiced the whole week and now you scored a goal on the weekend in your match, that puts the focus on the practice and the preparation, and that rather encourages a growth mindset. So yeah, lots of interesting perspectives in there.
Yeah, awesome. And the last question is, if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, what would you tell him?
Be confident, do what you like, and don't be too afraid. Make sure you always stay focused on relationships and on the people you work with or you spend time with in general, because ultimately they are the most important ingredient. Relationships are the most important ingredients to a happy life. I think I would just, give that advice. It's not that I live by that advice. It's not that I learned this because I fucked it up, but I would just tell my 20-year-old to make extra sure that he gets it and doesn't fuck it up.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks a lot for your time.
Cool. Thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate it.
See you next time, guys.